Good morning and welcome to another edition of App Marketing Conversations. I'm Ryan Morrell with Gamehouse. As always, I'm here with Roby Ganguly of Apptentive, Ian Sefferman of Mobile Dev HQ. So as we close out the end of another year of app marketing conversations, or app developer conversations, and that the app market in general, wanted to take a look back at what's happened over the last year, and then next week we'll talk about what we expect in 2014. So one of the things that we saw, at least from my view, is a shift in how marketers think about how they're going to actually acquire users, right? So for a large part of 2010, 11, 12, it was really about, I'm going to spend as much money as I can to go out and buy users on either an incentivized or unincentivized basis to just rise up the ranks as fast as possible. And 2013 feels like the year where we started to move away from that, right? And developers and marketers especially got a lot smarter about kind of a long-term user acquisition strategy. So Ian, from your perspective, what was the biggest change, especially, App Store optimization, obviously a big part of that. So was that the biggest thing you saw change from a marketing perspective, or?
No, I think there's a bunch of factors going into it, in my opinion. One was simply it just costs a freaking fortune to do that now if you want to do it, right? To compete with a Candy Crush is very, very, very costly. So that's one piece. I think another piece is the platform owners don't want that happening, and they're trying to figure out ways to stop that from happening. They're including ratings and the rankings and things like that. And three is just marketers are realizing, whoa, hey, do we want to do this at all costs? And the answer is no. They want to do this profitably. And so those things all coming together is sort of create this nice convergent zone of we don't want to just spend money to acquire users at all costs.
Yeah, well, I think your point is interesting, and this is the year we really heard a lot about cohorts and finding the right users and driving as much LTV as possible. So from your perspective, how have developer and marketer behavior changed as it relates to making sure we're targeting the right people, acquiring them, and retaining them?
Well, I think one of the things that I've seen is just that the team responsible for mobile has grown, right? So a couple years ago, if you had a couple engineers and a PM, you were lucky. Last year, you started seeing marketers get into the game. This year, there's user acquisition, there's somebody doing LTV modeling, there's a business owner, there's an actual P&L, it's folding back into the general corporate strategy for the parent company. And so the sophistication and the questions that people are asking has become much larger, especially as they've been asked to spend 10x what they were spending 2 years ago, right? So just the maturity of the organizations that are in the mobile space, I think, has led to people asking harder, tougher questions, and then thinking more about what else should we be doing. And as we've seen more of the search engine optimization skill sets move into the marketing function for mobile, or at least assume some of that role, I think they've necessarily brought some of their viewpoint that it's not just buying traffic.
Yeah. So what I heard you say, and I think is an interesting point, is that as mobile got big enough and the dollars became real and businesses started to care, we just went through a normal business process.
It feels that way. You work with a lot of marketers.
I do. I think that's true. I think it's really interesting, and especially watching the other sort of thing is, like we talked about before, this wasn't just the year of games,
right?
And as you branched out of games were easier to play that role, but as you branched out of games, people had to think about it in different ways. It also meant that the teams coming into it were more seasoned teams on the marketing side, as you're talking about. All of that stuff coming together made it all happen.
Yeah. So now what we see is marketers who are going out to acquire users, or just marketing their app in general, are kind of taking a holistic approach and looking at all the different avenues that they can go down, from App Store SEO to retention and engagement, user acquisition, kind of just SEO in general. So
and a lot of them are actually starting to think about, what are the partnerships I get?
Yeah.
So that I can actually drive installs through other sites, or I can drive installs through OEM deals. How do I get on handsets, right? The notion of about a decade ago, like trying to get installed on the deck, hasn't gone away. You know, it's morphed a little bit, but I definitely see marketers looking at interesting ways to get pre-installs with manufacturers on phones or with packages of software too. So that's kind of interesting, right? People are looking around and saying, where's a good fit for me?
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting divergence of iOS and Android, right? So there is no OEM pre-install on Apple,
Right.
but there is on Android. And so if you're, and let's be realistic, if you're not a name brand or have something really interesting, you're not going to get an OEM install. So don't waste your time on that. But if you are one of those guys, how do you think about who is the right OEM to target? Who's the right carrier to target with your app or your offer?
I think that a lot of it has to do with geography. So if a carrier is really strong in a geography where you're strong and you are in some way tapping into their strategy, their interest in like being localized or actually like using very specific geofencing to offer carrier bound like push text and marketing opportunities, then you start to help them push for their strategy because the carriers are all looking for ways to differentiate. So that's definitely a place. And if you have a big name brand, whether you're a retailer or you're an entertainment company, I'm seeing some of those folks be like some of the carriers be really interested in talking to them just because they want to have something unique.
Yeah.
So this is a good question for those people who have never done this and don't know the first thing about it. Do you want to go to the carriers or do you want to go to the handset manufacturers?
So I've done these deals before.
Yeah.
The carriers always tell you to go to the handset manufacturers. The handset manufacturers always tell you to go to the carriers. And they're hard, right? So I mean, ultimately, what goes on the deck is defined by the carrier.
Okay.
In most cases, right?
Yep.
So you just got to find the right person. The carrier is going to champion you to actually do it.
Yep.
So, but be wary; they're difficult deals. But they can make money.
Sure.
So what other? One final question I have: what other differences have you seen come up this year between iOS and Android, and how marketers can go about acquiring users?
So this is something that we can definitely talk about in the other segment as well. But personally, I think that Google Play has done all of the innovation in the App Store this year. I haven't seen iOS do almost anything. We'll see what the Topsy deal is. That's interesting. No idea what they actually want that for. But Google Play is like they're changing lots. They're doing interesting things. The biggest change that Apple made was applying ratings to the rankings.
Yeah.
And so it seems like Google Play is incrementally leaping ahead of Apple in terms of innovation and uniqueness in the app stores.
Okay.
And I would sort of layer onto that the innovation in the App Store space that Google is leading is definitely waking developers up to it more, right? Like I'm hearing a lot more developers just say it's easier to develop for them or they have these good things. And then I'm also seeing more work on the Microsoft Nokia side of things to make their App Store more interesting to developers. They have this program called Develop that's really cool. And there's just like, there's the awareness in the space that Apple's complacent, right? And Google's definitely taking advantage of it in some ways, but Amazon, Microsoft, Nokia, and other folks are paying attention and saying, what can we do? And I think ultimately that's good for developers and marketers, that the marketplaces actually have to compete with one another around features and helping each other out.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. I'd probably disagree that Apple's complacent, but that's another topic. Okay, so thanks for watching very much. Thanks very much for watching. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and check out the other segments from Ian and Roby.